former NFL quarterback Tim Hasselbeck what he sees from Shedeur Sanders, including his future in the NFL.
I think there are things he does at the position extremely well that you need to be able to do well to play in the National Football League. I actually think, that's the good side of it. I think the bad side of it for him, I just think physically there are limitations that he has as a player that don't know that anyone is building around that. Could he end up, playing in the league for 10 years, in some role as a backup and then maybe get an opportunity to play? Sure, he could. But I don't think that anybody, listen, there isn't a single team of the 32 that would look at him right now and be like, yep, I want to build around that guy. It's not, I'm not saying that to be demeaning or mean. That is the reality of who he actually is as a player and how he is viewed, quite frankly, consensusly around the league.
Spencer, again, that's a former quarterback, and the reason I state that is he knows what he's looking at. He knows what the position entails. I don't necessarily disagree with him. I think there's some things there if you can clean up, maybe. What are your thoughts? Are we looking at, is there a world where both Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel are not on the Browns roster?
I think probably one of the two is still here. And I'll explain that here in a second. But what I would say about those comments and others like it where people are just trying to say, Todd Monken shouldn't tie himself to Shedeur Sanders or it's time to move on from Shedeur Sanders or whatever. I think people are kind of missing the big picture part of this for the Browns. What options do they realistically have right now? And you could always say the draft. You could always say maybe they fall in love with somebody in the draft and they draft another quarterback, and I could buy that. But at the same time, it's like, if they're trying to sort of put a competent offense together here in year one, and maybe they're not in position to get the top tier quarterbacks or quarterback, because in this class it certainly feels like it's Fernando Mendoza, big gap than everybody else. But if they're not in position to get one of those guys, then yeah, maybe you do try to sort of punt this year, get sort of just a stopgap guy, or figure it out for a year until you can maybe figure out exactly what you're looking for in 2027. So that could play out in the draft process. But aside from that, it's, the names I've heard are Mac Jones. Well, you got to trade for Mac Jones. Malik Willis, he's probably the top guy in terms of names in free agency. Do the Browns have the cap space? I always like to not overreact to salary cap situations because everyone's always like, oh, they have no cap space, and then we see the cap go up as much as it's going to go up to between 305 million next year, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, never mind, the Browns do have cap space, and they're going to renegotiate all these contracts to create more. So it's not that they don't have any cap space, but we also saw last year they created some cap space and could only do minor moves. They weren't making these big signings. Like Sam Darnold, for example, wasn't an option for them because they couldn't afford it. So it's not that I think they can't do things, but I don't know that they can make the big splash if Malik Willis is going to be considered that as far as free agent quarterbacks are concerned. So I do think this year is kind of this bridge year where you're trying to figure it out. And if you're Todd Monken, I don't know why you're ruling out anything at this point. Why would you just, cut off your hand in spite of your face, or cut off your nose in spite of your face, and take somebody out of the equation right now and just be like, yeah, we don't want Shedeur because we think we have all these other options. You kind of got to wait and see and take that type of approach. I just don't know what people are expecting from the Browns where it's like, just kick this guy to the curb. You don't need him. You don't need to tie yourself to him. And also, it's kind of a win-win for Todd Monken. If he turns Shedeur into something better than he was last year, then he looks like he's the wizard and the Browns look like the smartest people ever for hiring him as their head coach. If he doesn't turn him into that and he still kind of has a lot of the ups and downs that he had in year one, then nobody's going to blame him for not getting more out of him because at this point, to what's being said about the idea that he's not how he's viewed around the league, nobody expects him to be that anyway. So I don't really know that he can come out really looking bad in a situation where he keeps Shedeur Sanders on the roster and tries to make it work. But what I would say about how that sort of shakes out, if I'm picking between either the two rookies from this past year, I honestly think Dillon Gabriel is probably the odd man out here. And I just think in general, one of these rookies is going to be the odd man out. And I do lean Dillon Gabriel because are they really going to trot out a quarterback room in 2026? That's Dillon Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders, two guys who are in their second year and obviously need time to develop, plus Deshaun Watson. Is that what I think the room's going to be? No. I think they're going to add somebody, whether it's through the draft, whether it's through free agency. And if they add somebody in the draft, then it's like you got 3 quarterbacks who are all kind of projects. 2 of them were from the previous regime, by the way, or I guess not the previous regime, but the previous coach. So is that like too many projects that you're juggling at the same time? I just don't know if that works. And we know they'll carry forward throughout the offseason. So I think they're probably all here in the offseason plus another addition. But I don't know that by the time we get to end of training camp and they have to make cuts or trades or whatever, that Dillon Gabriel is part of this equation. I think it just kind of adds up to we all feel that was a Kevin Stefanski pick. It seems pretty obvious. And if he doesn't really fit what Todd Monken wants to do fully, and you feel like there's more juice provided by Shedeur Sanders, which I think was evident in the way that he played with the offense versus the way Dillon Gabriel did, then why, like, what purpose does he serve to sort of be here? So it's hard to convince Andrew Berry to give up on his own draft picks, but if that was truly a Kevin Stefanski pick, he'd probably be more inclined to make a change and just try to trade him for whatever he can get. But I'm curious to see how that plays out. But I would kind of lean at this point that I think Dillon Gabriel is probably not part of this quarterback room by the time the season starts.
Yeah, I think Shedeur has a much higher ceiling and probably a lower floor. But you go with the ceiling when you're looking at developmental type guys.